But now you've just spent $300 on this piece of. What do you do if you've got a low budget and you can't necessarily afford to just drop $5,000 on a set of zoom lenses? If you're looking for a new lens for your camera, you've got a ton of different options out there. Do you get a prime lens, a zoom lens, a cheap lens, or a more expensive lens? I am here to answer all of those questions and hopefully give you a really solid idea of what lens you should buy next. The biggest question you're going to have to answer for yourself is whether you want to go with zoom lenses or with prime lenses. The main thing with a zoom lens is that when you use it, you are able to zoom it in or zoom it out and change the focal length. You've got multiple focal lengths. This one is 24 to 70, so you can go from 24 millimeters all the way into 70 millimeters. This ultimately means that you can be more flexible on a wedding day. You can just zoom it in or zoom it out and achieve pretty much whatever focal length you're hoping to achieve. And that's where zoom lenses really shine. They're super fast, they're super flexible in getting multiple different scenarios. Whereas prime lenses are more slow, you've got to change them out if you want different focal lengths or different looks. So with the zoom lens, you're just getting that speed, that ease of use, that flexibility. Some of the main downsides to zoom lenses though are that they are generally more heavy than prime lenses, because with a prime lens, you're only getting one focal length. They don't have to be as big to house all the different glass elements inside. Another thing is that zoom lenses in general are going to be a little bit less sharp than prime lenses. On really nice zoom lenses, like the top end Canon lenses, you're probably not really gonna notice any difference in sharpness. And probably the biggest con with zoom lenses is that the minimum aperture cannot go as low as prime lenses. This prime lens goes down to f1.4 and this zoom lens only goes down to f2.8. That's kind of the lowest you're gonna get on most zoom lenses is 2.8. There's a few that go down to f2, but for the majority of the time, they really don't go below f2.8. So your depth of field is gonna be deeper, which means that things in the background are not gonna be quite as blurry. They're gonna be a little bit more in focus with a zoom lens compared to a prime lens. Switching over to prime lenses, these are gonna be the opposite of zoom lenses when it comes to focal lengths. You are stuck with a single focal length per prime lens. This is a 50 millimeter. If you need to get closer to your subject, you either have to take that lens off, switch it out for one that's a bit tighter, or you have to physically move your body closer to that subject. Ultimately, it just means that they are not as flexible, they're not as fast. On a wedding day, you're not able to bounce around and get quite as many different shots, but what it does have is the ability to go down to a much lower aperture. So how do these pros and cons affect what lens you should be using on a wedding day? Well, I think first we need to figure out what's most important on a wedding day. Now, in my opinion, I think zooms are better suited to this because they zoom in and out. You've got multiple focal lengths in the same lens. I just think they lend themselves better to that running gun, fast-paced environment. But if you are comfortable and able to do that with prime lenses, then by all means, go with primes. And speaking of speed and flexibility, if you're looking to spend less time editing and more time doing fun things, you might want to check out Aftershoot. Aftershoot uses AI to cull through your entire gallery of photos in a matter of minutes, removing all the duplicates, the blurred photos, the ones where people are blinking, gets rid of them all. Plus, you can actually edit all of your photos inside Aftershoot as well with just a few clicks. It'll take your style and apply it across the board to all your photos in that whole gallery. Whether you're a wedding photographer, a studio portrait photographer, or you shoot senior photos, whatever photos it is that you shoot, Aftershoot can take those photos and save you a bunch of time. I've been using it myself, and honestly, it's wonderful. I can't imagine going back to the before times. If you want to try it out for yourself, check the link in the description for a 30-day free trial. So on top of what matters on the wedding day and how that will affect your lens choice, your own shooting and editing style is also going to dictate what kind of lens you get, zoom versus prime. So if you've got that documentary candid style approach to shooting weddings, I'd say zoom lenses are probably going to be the right choice for you. On the flip side, if you've got more of a fine art posed style of photography, prime lenses might be better for that. You're going to get that really nice blurry background, you're getting nice, really sharp photos, and if you've got more of that posed, curated shooting style, you don't have to worry as much about getting in people's way. It's just kind of part of how you shoot. And the final piece of this comparison is going to be price. Like I mentioned earlier, zooms are generally a little bit cheaper than primes are simply because you have to buy less lenses. For the most part, for a standard wedding photography kit, you really only need 2 to 3 zoom lenses, but if you go with primes, you're going to need about 5 to 7 of them. Assuming that you're buying nicer, higher end lenses, a standard kit of zoom lenses is probably going to run you around $5,000, but a standard kit of prime lenses is going to run you about $7,500. Another thing with the prime lenses, if you want to have that whole focal range available to you at all times, you're going to have to carry all of those lenses with you. And it means that you're always wearing a backpack or a sling bag of some sort to keep all those lenses with you. I just feel like it would get really annoying to do. Pretty much the longest reaching prime lens is going to be like a 135, whereas this goes all the way to 200 millimeters. There are some lenses like you get like a 600 mil. That's very impractical to carry around with you on a wedding day. Nobody's really gonna do that. But the reason that I think having that 70 to 200 millimeter lens is so valuable is, again, for those little tiny moments where you see something happening, you can't physically walk there fast enough, or it would be an interruption to walk over there. Being able to just punch in really quickly, really tight, and capture that moment, whether it's a person crying and it's like a really nice close-up of their face with the tear running down their cheek, or it's just this really nice intimate moment between the bride and her father and they're all the way across the room. If you're on a prime lens, you're probably not going to be able to capture that moment very well because you either have to swap lenses, you have to run over there, whatever it may be. All that being said, I do really like prime lenses. I just think the zoom lenses are generally better suited to wedding days. Portrait time in particular is great with a prime lens because you don't have the pressure of a bunch of people around you, and you're not worried about getting in people's way. It's usually just you, the videographer, and the couple. So you can kind of move wherever you want to move. So once you've decided whether you want to go with zoom lenses or prime lenses, which lenses should you buy? Well, if you go with zoom lenses, a standard kit for wedding photography is going to be a 24-70 and a 70-200. You really don't need anything more than that unless you're talking about second shooters, and then that's a whole other thing. If you are a Canon shooter, I would get the Canon RF 24-70 and the RF 70-200. Now, if you shoot on Sony, you can actually save a little bit of money and buy Sigma branded lenses instead of the Sony branded ones. you're actually going to save quite a bit of money going with Sigma over the Sony branded lenses. And for those, again, I would get the Sigma 24-70 and the Sigma 70-200. And if you're Nikon, go ahead and get the Nikon 24-70 and Nikon 70-200. There's also a very cool lens available to you if you are a Sony or a Nikon shooter, and that is the 35-150. This lens spans a huge range of focal lengths, and if you are a one camera shooter, this is kind of like the perfect one camera lens. These more unique lenses, the 35-150 and the 28-70, I wouldn't call them necessary lenses. Like, I think that the 24-70 and the 70-200 are necessary, but if you wanted to branch out, if you have more money, because these lenses are going to be generally more expensive than this lens or this lens. Moving on to the prime lenses. Your standard lens kit for wedding photography is going to be a 24mm, a 35mm, a 50mm, and an 85mm. You could get by without the 24, just having 35, 50, and 85. However, I think 24 is important. If you want to get wide interior shots or exterior of a building, you oftentimes can't really get it with the 35 unless you back up really far, and there are plenty of times where backing up really far is not really an option. Now, when you go to find those 4 prime lenses, you're generally going to have 3 options. You're going to have f1.2, f1.4, and f1.8. The lower the number, so the 1.2s, always going to be the most expensive because they let in the most light, they get the most shallow depth of field, they're the most premium lenses. And on the other end of things, the f1.8 lenses, always going to be the cheapest, always going to be the worst build quality. I like to land on f1.4. f1.2 is really nice, but you're probably not going to go down to an f1.2 aperture hardly ever, just because it's so shallow and you really aren't going to need that. So if you are shooting Canon, I would get the Canon RF 24, 35, 50, and 85 f1.4. It is worth noting, Canon does not offer an 85 f1.4. They only offer a 1.8 or a 1.2. So it's going to be kind of up to you whether you want to make the jump up to the really expensive, really nice f1.8 85mm lens, or if you are okay going with the cheaper f1.8. If you are a Sony shooter, it's going to be very simple. Sigma, f1.4, 24, 35, 50, 85. That's it. And for Nikon, get the Nikon 24, 35, 50, and 85. Nikon's a little bit weird right now. I don't know if they just haven't released these lenses yet or if they're never coming at all, but right now, at the time of filming this video, they do not have an f1.4 of the 24mm or the 85. So for those 2 lenses, you're gonna need to buy either a 1.8 or 1.2. One more lens that I did not include in either of the zoom or prime kits is a super wide lens, something wider than 24mm. Now, this is not a lens that gets used very often, but in my own photography, I have noticed that it would be nice every once in a while to have something that goes wider than 24mm. So for me, for a lens like this, I'm trying to find something that's as cheap as possible while still being of reasonably good quality. For Canon, I would get the Canon 16mm f2.8. For both Sony and Nikon, I would get the same lens. It is the Viltrox 16mm f2.8, and this one runs about $600. If you're putting together your own hybrid kit of lenses, I would recommend starting with the zoom kit and then adding in primes from there, just because zoom lenses are so flexible, and even though they can't let in quite as much light, you can still get the shots that you need. So let's wrap this whole video up. How do you choose the lenses that you're gonna buy? First, I would figure out what is your style. How do you like to operate on a wedding day? Now, what do you do if you've got a low budget and you can't necessarily afford to just drop $5,000 on a set of zoom lenses? Well, I would start with figuring out how many lenses do you want to buy if money wasn't even an issue. If you had infinite money, which lenses would make up the best kit for you? Figure out what that is, and then pick the lens that is the most important, the lens that is going to make the biggest difference to your photography and is going to allow you to shoot the way that you want to shoot. Then once you have that first lens, continue saving up and buying each individual lens as you go. But the most important thing would be just to get that one really important lens right up front. Something that I see a lot of photographers do, and something that I've definitely done myself, is buying cheap gear at the very beginning because you feel like you can't afford the really nice gear. What ends up happening though is that you buy a cheap 24-70, and let's say this is $300. So you buy this because what you really want is the expensive 24-70, but you can't afford it. So you buy something cheap as a placeholder. And what ends up happening over time is that within a year, year and a half, this thing starts to feel really, really crappy and you really want to replace it. But you've just sunk $300 into this. So you end up delaying the purchase of the nice lenses by quite a bit because you bought the cheap ones. If you're a wedding photographer and you have a favorite set of lenses, I would love to know what those lenses are, because I'm sure that they're different from mine. Everyone seems to have a different combo of lenses that they love the most. And if you found this video helpful, give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and go watch some of our other videos for more wedding photography tips.